we came to know about the Roman Basilica. It was the building in which judicial, commercial, and governmental activities took place. It became the primary architectural model for Christian churches in the Middle Ages, and medieval Italian churches generally imitated its basic design. Such buildings usually contained a central nave with colonnades along an aisle at each side and an apse at one end. On this raised platform sat the bishop or the priest. Though these Romanesque churches were heavily influenced by Roman basilica, they had a few key differences. The roofs, they were made of stone vaults, which were much heavier and needed much more support. If you consider the Roman times, the vaults, they generally were made of concrete, so which was lighter than stone. So the solution of supporting this higher weight was to provide thicker walls and piers rather than the columns alone. This made the inside space much more dark and gloomy, and the height of the building were kept rather low. The exteriors, they were very simple, and several geometric forms are often made up the buildings. Simple geometric forms rather than one large unified space. So we can summarize the following points in general appearance of Romanesque architecture. The first one is Romanesque churches were heavily influenced by the Roman basilica. The roofs were made of stone vaults, which were much heavier compared to the Roman times and needed more support. The solution was thicker walls and piers rather than the columns alone to support the interior space, and this made the interior space dark, and the exteriors were very simple, and combination of several simple geometric forms are often made up instead of one large form or instead of any large space. These churches, they had some characteristic features. They were largely of Latin cross plan. The space inside them were very dark, and it's very formal and dignified. The exterior is simple and severe. It had a modest height. There can be horizontal lines they were much prominent from the external of these Romanesque buildings, and the combination of multiple units instead of any particular in any particular big open space can be found. If we look into the plans, there are some common features that we can find throughout the churches of Romanesque architectural period. Most of these churches had largely a Latin cross plan, as we discussed. In England, the extension eastward that may be long, while in Italy it is often short and it may be non-existent. So you can refer to the schematic diagram here that is given for understanding what is the east side and what is the west side of a typical church, and the apse that we will discuss later, or the sanctum sanctorum or the holiest place of a church, they are generally placed in the east. They are always placed in the east, and the west facade actually holds the entrance to the church, which we will say it is basically the west work, and we will discuss it later on. Fine. So in Germany, the Romanesque churches often distinctive from the rest of the Europe, or they have apses at both the east and west ends, and the main entrance are being central to one side, from the north or from the south side of the church. It is probable that in this form came into existence to accommodate a baptistry at the west end as well. Fine. The central and principal part of a Christian church, which extends from the entrance or the narthex to the transepts, is called as the nave. We had discussed these terms in the previous lesson in early Christian architecture. So we will see that these terms exist here as well. So then there comes the aisle. The aisle is also known as alley. It is more specifically a passageway to either side of the nave that is separated from the nave by the colonnades or arcades, which are basically a row of pillars or columns. These aisles occasionally stop at the transept, but often these aisles can be continued around the apse. These aisles are thus categorized as nave aisles, transept aisles, or choir aisles. Fine. A semicircular choir with aisles continued around it, providing access to a series of chapel, is a shavet. In a cruciform church, the whole arm, which is set at right angle to the nave, it is called the transept. The transept appeared infrequently in early Christian churches. Old St. Peter's is one of these few examples of basilican churches with one transept. The transept would not become a standard component of Christian church until this Romanesque period. The area in a church where the transept and the nave intersects is called as the crossing. Then there comes the apse. Apse is basically a recess, sometimes rectangular but usually semicircular, in the wall of the eastern end of a Christian church. The apse in the Roman basilica frequently contained the image of the emperor, and it was the place where the magistrate dispensed the law. In early Christian basilica, the apses contained the cathedra or the throne of the bishop and the altar as well. The apse at the eastern end of the Romanesque church is also almost always semicircular, with either a high chancel surrounded by an ambulatory, as in France, or a square end from which an apse projects, as in Germany and Italy. Then there comes the ambulatory. Ambulatory is basically similar to the cloisters that we can find in Indian architecture. The creation of this ambulatory helped to accommodate the growing number of pilgrims, and it was a basic principle of the pilgrim churches. In this arrangement, the aisles flanking the nave, they were extended alongside the sanctuary and around the apse. Small relics, they were placed inside the chapels or the niches, radiating out of this ambulatory and facilitating the flow of the pilgrims, so that more and more pilgrims can have a better look, close look to all these relics. The Romanesque churches, they were dark. This was mostly because of the use of stone barrel vault construction. The new concept of stone vaulting required stronger wall for support. This system provided excellent acoustics and reduced fire danger. However, a barrel vault that exerts continuous lateral thrust or the outward pressure all along the walls to support the vault. This meant that the outer walls of the churches, they had to be extra thick. It also meant that the windows had to be small and few. When builders dared to pierce the walls with additional or larger windows, they risked the structural failure, and to some cases the churches did collapse during that time. Because of lack of knowledge of building statics, it was necessary to build the strong and thick walls with the narrow openings. So, Romanesque churches and castles were dark with very few openings. Wars and invasions were commonplace, so windows and doors, they were kept to a minimum. With stones and masonry buildings, the buildings were safe from fire and invaders, and they required large support for the weight of walls and vaults. Early Romanesque ceilings and roofs were often made of wood, as if the architects had not quite understood how to span using heavy stones. We should not forget that the art of making concrete was completely forgotten by then, as claimed by historians. The heavy stone roofing, as we discussed before, creates outward thrust, and that makes the walls thicker to counter that outward thrust. This new concept or the new development didn't take long to manifest. From the simple barrel vaulting or the semicircular roof vaulting, it turned into cross vaulting, where we will see that the lateral thrust is converted to 4 corners, which can be countered much more easily, and it became much more efficient in the later time with the use of pointed arch vaults, which were became much more adventurous in the Gothic period as well, and we will discuss its progression with graphic examples later on. The main characteristics or identifying characteristics of a Romanesque building from the exteriors, they are basically has to be covered by stone walls. Most of them are covered by stone walls. The walls were thick. Then they needed strong buttresses or the thickening of walls to support the weight of the walls. The foundations are strong, and there are very few fenestration or puncture or windows to make this building like a fortress. The Romanesque churches, they have an emphasis on horizontal lines, which are similar to the Greek and Roman public buildings. We can see it is starkly different from the next architectural movement, that is the Gothic architecture, where the dominance of vertical lines can be seen throughout all the architectural examples. In this slide, you can see 2 examples. On the left, this is a Romanesque church, and on the right, this is basically a Gothic church. So we can easily understand the difference in scale, the difference in terms of expression. The left one, that is Romanesque, is much more horizontal with predominant horizontal lines, and on the right we can see the verticality is basically dominating this particular style of architecture. So verticality is much more associated with Gothic church, and horizontality or horizontal lines, they are more associated with the Romanesque style. We can say that the combination of masonry, arches and the piers, they were the foundations of the Romanesque style. The main concept of this particular style was the addition of pure individual geometric forms, as you can see in this particular example, that simple geometric forms, they are clubbed together instead of one large form, and this was one of the definitive characteristics of Romanesque period. Not only from the exterior appearance also, but also from the internals, from the arrangement of spaces, we can say that this principle is followed here as well. On the left, we can see there is a church of Romanesque style, where we can see very small individual pure geometric forms. They come together and merge into a whole form. But on the right, we can see a Gothic style church plan, where we can see one uninterrupted space is enclosed by the exterior, by the envelope. So this was the basic difference in the style of these 2 periods. Now we will discuss about the properties of the interior space of Romanesque church. We can see extensive use of arches in the interior, from the interiors as well. The arches defining the naves of these churches, they are well modulated and they are geometrically logical. With one look, you can see the repeating shapes and also the proportion that makes sense from an immense and weighty structure. In these churches, there is generally a very large arcade on the ground level, made up of bulky piers or columns, which we call as the nave. The piers may have been filled with rubble rather than being solid, or they are made of carved stone. We will discuss the details in the coming slides. Above these arcades, there is a second level of smaller arches, often in pairs with a column between the two. The next higher level was again proportionately smaller, creating a rational diminution of structural elements as the mass of the building is reduced on the upper levels. So, we can say there are basically three levels, and at the second level we can see the tribune, and over them we can see the clerestory windows which illuminate the inside spaces of this church. Climate and material, they played a very significant role in shaping the Romanesque architectural style in different regions. The use of materials as well were determined by the availability of the material around that region. Use of local material like stone, brick, marble or terracotta or ready-made columns, they depended on the region itself from where these items are to be sourced and where it is going to be built. The most important most important of this is that the climatic conditions, it contributed to the differences in treatments in north and the south part of the Alps. In the northern part, we can see the window openings, they were enlarged, and the pitch of the roof is much higher. That means they are much more inclined because of the higher snowfall. And as that were much cold, that's why to admit much and much more sunlight, the window openings were enlarged. But on the south, where the sun is really very generous, we can see the window openings, they reduce in size, and as the snowfall is not that severe compared to the north, we can see the use of flat roofs on the buildings as well. Now we are going to discuss the different architectural elements that we can see in different Romanesque buildings. So the main components, they were basically the thick walls, rounded arches of different subcategory. They are sturdy piers and columns. They were existing there very prominently. Then groin walls and barrel walls, very large towers and decorative western facade, or we call it as westwork. And these large towers were basically situated on the westwork itself. Then we can see extensively decorative arcading, and we can see small windows to keep the strength of the wall strong, so that and they become much more resistant to fire. And in the interior we can see extensive use of frescoes and stained glass. So in the next slides we are going to discuss all these elements in details and how the contemporary social, political and religious context influenced all these elements, and how they altogether formed the architectural style that is called Romanesque. We will discuss it in the coming slides. The walls of Romanesque buildings were often of massive thickness with few and comparatively very small openings. The building materials that are used in Romanesque architecture, it differs greatly across Europe depending upon the local stone and the building traditions. In Italy, Poland, most of the part of Germany and parts of Netherlands, we can see the use of bricks. The other areas, we can see extensive use of limestone, granite and flintstone. The building stones were often used in comparatively small and irregular pieces, bedded in thick mortar. Smooth ashlar masonry, it was not a distinguishing feature of the style, particularly in the earlier part of the period, but occurred chiefly where the easily worked limestone was available. The exterior walls are often characterized by corbels arches at the cornice. It is one series of corbel that is called as corbel table or blind arches. The next component of Romanesque architecture was its arches and openings, which we will discuss now. The experimentation with different types of arches were observed in Romanesque architecture. The most extensively used arch was the Roman semicircular arch. They were used for openings such as doors and windows and vaults and arcades. Though most of the arches that we can see in Romanesque architecture were semicircular, but we can see some derivatives of semicircular arches as well. Apart from the pure semicircular arch, which is basically a half of a circle, we can see three derivatives of semicircular arch, namely segmented arch, stilted arch, and horseshoe arch. Fine. So all these arches, they were single centered or one centered arch. So semicircular arch itself was also a single centered arch. In segmented arches or segmental arches, only one segment which is less than the half of the complete circle is used, and the center point is always situated below the springing line of the arch. You can see such an example of segmented arch on the top row and right hand side of this particular slide. The next arch that we will discuss is the stilted arch. It is a semicircular arch, but it is on stilts. Stilt means that the base of this particular arch is heightened, and the center of the circle which is forming that arch, it resides above the springing line of this particular arch. You can see such an example of this type of arch in the second row, first schematic diagram. If both the ends, now we are discussing the horseshoe arch or the Moorish arch, sometimes we call it, or sometimes we call it as a keyhole arch as well. In this case, in this particular type of arch, it is again a derivative of semicircular arch. It has one center in most of the cases, and in this case, the semicircle continues to a lower point and tries to complete that particular circle. Here also, in this type of arch, the center point lies above the springing line of this arch. Sometimes these horseshoe arches, they are placed over a segmental arch or semicircular arch so that it gives an impression like a keyhole. That's why sometimes we call it as a keyhole arch, and we can see such an example on the extreme right bottom corner of this particular slide. The pairing of two arch windows is a characteristic feature of Romanesque architecture, may it be the ecclesiastic architecture or the domestic architecture. Ecclesiastic means anything that is related to religion, in this case the Christianity, and the literal meaning of the term ecclesiastic means the clergyman or the priest. So ecclesiastic architecture means a religious architecture. Often these pair of two arched windows are separated by a pillar which is called as colonnade, and it is often set within a larger arch. On the top left corner, you can see such an example of two arched windows, which was basically a characteristic feature of Romanesque architecture. The bottom is also an example of such two arched windows. Apart from this, ocular windows we can also see in Romanesque architecture. They are mostly common in Italy, particularly in the facade gable, and they are also seen in Germany. The third picture in this slide is a snap from the Worms Cathedral, Germany, which displays a great variety of openings and arcades, including the wheel and rose windows, which are basically circular windows, and we can they are derivatives of ocular windows. Ocular windows are basically the windows which are in circular shape, and when these circular shaped windows are elaborately decorated, we can say them as a rose window. When there are radiating spokes or wheels that we can see in this Worms Cathedral facade, sometimes we say it as a which window? Wheel window. Fine. So ocular windows, they are two different kinds. They are basically the wheel and rose window. In this particular slide, the bottom part is basically a wheel window, and on the top of it, where we can see the floral pattern, we call it a rose window. Later Romanesque churches may have wheel windows or rose windows with a plate tracery. Tracery means the work of glass, and not single colored glass, rather they are colored glass. There are also a very small number of buildings in Romanesque style, such as Auto Cathedral in France, in which we can see the pointed arches that has been used extensively. But the extensive use of pointed arches we will see in the Gothic period, but in Romanesque period also these pointed arches were in use. On the extreme right of this particular slide, you can see a still from the Auto Cathedral in France, where we can see the pointed arches that had been used. The next component that we are going to discuss is the Romanesque columns. These columns are often used in Romanesque architecture, but they were varied, they varied in building material and in decorative style. In Italy, a great number of antique Roman columns, they were salvaged and they were reused in the interiors, and the same practice had been done in early Christian architecture as well, as we had discussed before. So these salvaged columns, they were exactly the Roman columns that were used during the Roman times, and their characteristics were basically the same as the Roman classical columns. In most part of Europe, the Romanesque columns were massive, as they supported thick upper walls with very small windows and sometimes very heavy walls. So they are constructed of ashlar masonry, and sometimes their cores were hollow and they were filled in rubble, where these really massive columns were used to hold up the heavy load on the top. This type of columns we can see in Durham Cathedral in the UK. These huge untapered and infilled columns were sometimes ornamented with decoration on its surface. We can also see the use of monolithic columns in Romanesque architecture. These columns were cut from a single piece of stone, and they were frequently used in Italy, as they had been in Roman and in early Christian architecture. These type of columns, the other type of columns, such as the drum columns that we had seen in the temple of Athena Parthenos in Greece, and in most of the columns of the classical Roman Empire, where these drum columns were extensively used. Along with these drum columns, the hollow core columns we can also see, as we just discussed a little before, salvage columns and pilasters, which are basically the columns embedded in wall, or they are false columns which does not carry any load but gives an impression of the columns. They are called the pilasters. These components were used. So the basic four types of columns that we can see are the salvage columns, the drum columns, the hollow core columns, and the pilasters. So these are the basic four types of columns that were extensively used in the Romanesque architecture. So these salvaged columns, they are mostly used in Italy, as it was the center point of the Western Roman Empire, and there were Roman ruins lying around all of the Italy or Rome. So sourcing these classical Roman columns were easier compared to other parts of the world. So these Roman columns were salvaged and they were reused in the interiors and on the porticos of different churches. The most durable of these columns are of marble, and they have some they were bedded from bedded means they were quarried. They were quarried horizontally. So they had an uniform color and an uniform appearance, and they were most durable. But these horizontally bedded columns and the most durable columns, they were less in number. The majority are vertically bedded and sometimes of variety of colors. They may have retained their original Roman kind of capitals, generally of Corinthian or the composite style of capital. In some buildings, they have an odd assortment of columns in which large capitals are placed on short columns and small capitals are placed on taller columns to even the height. Architectural compromises of this type are seen where the materials have been salvaged from different buildings or from a number of buildings. The salvaged columns were also used to a lesser extent in France. The next type of column is the drum column. In most part of Europe, Romanesque columns, they were massive and they supported the thick upper walls with smaller windows and sometimes the heavy walls. The most common method of construction was to build these heavy columns out of stone cylinders. They were called, and these stone cylinders were called drums. And we discussed the detailed method of construction of this drum column in Greek or Hellenistic architecture. Then comes the hollow core column. Hollow core column we already discussed that they were only outer shell was made of dressed ashlar masonry and then they were filled with rubble. So the size of these columns, they were really huge and they were decorated with different geometric patterns on its exterior surface. Durham Cathedral is such an example. The columns in Durham Cathedral is one such example. Now we will discuss about the capitals of these columns. The decorated Corinthian style, they provided the inspiration for different Romanesque capitals, and the accuracy, though it is not that accurate, but the Romanesque artisans, they tried to copy the proportion and the beauty of the Romanesque, the Roman and Roman Corinthian and composite type of capitals. And definitely the accuracy of this imitation depended on the availability of original models that these artisans can see around them. So the capitals in Italian churches such as Pisa Cathedral and in southern France, they are much closer to the classical form and style compared to those capitals that were carved in England. So as in England, there were very less number of Roman examples to follow or Roman examples to copy from. Their accuracy was not that much. Rather, in southern France and in Italy, the efficiency of copying was much higher. The Corinthian capital is essentially round at the bottom. Corinthian and composite both, they are round at the bottom, where it sits on the circular column shaft and a square abacus at the top, where it supports the wall or it supports the arch. This form of capital was maintained in general proportion and it was the outline of most of the Romanesque capital. We can see two types of, mainly two types of capital. One is the block or cushion capital or cubic capital. The second one is historiated or figured capital. The block or cushion or cubic capital, this was devoid of any ornamentation or very little ornamentation was there. There was no figure. There was no figure sculpted on the capital of those columns. But on the other hand, the historiated or figured capital was more decorative. These capitals, these historiated or figured capitals were decorated with figures of animals, birds or humans. They used either alone or combined with a foliage. There may be foliage, there may not be foliage. Like in the example on the right side where it is shown, there are on the left hand side of historiated or figured capital duo, on the left hand side, that image is in black and white, you can see the acanthus leaves and the sculptures existing together on that particular capital. But on the extreme right, the colored figure, they don't have the foliation or the foliage, rather it only has the sculpture on the capital. These figures in the capital, they may or may not have any meaning. They may be symbolic or part of a narrative sequence. These historiated capitals or figured capitals were most commonly used in Romanesque from the late 11th to mid 12th centuries. Use of alternating piers and columns was another characteristic feature of the Romanesque architecture. These piers were often employed to support the arches. They were built of masonry and they were square or rectangular in cross section. They generally have a horizontal molding representing a capital at the springing point of the arch. Although basically rectangular, the piers can often be highly of complex form. Piers that occur at the intersection of two large spaces which is bound by two large arches, such as those places under the crossing of the nave and the transept. They are in cruciform, their cross-sectional shape is cruciform. So each arch here, they have their own supporting rectangular pier which are juxtaposed at right angle containing the same axis. On the right side of this screen, you can now see that one of such pier with pure rectangular cross section. Now we know what are piers. Now we will discuss about the alternation of piers and columns, which is basically the common characteristics. It is found in both churches and arcades that separates the large interior spaces of castle. Is the alternation of piers and the columns. This is the simplest form where one column is altered with a pier. So one column, then again one pier, again one column, one pier. This is, we can say this is AB formation. Fine. But sometimes the arrangement of these columns are in multiples of 2 or 3. So within 2 piers there may be 2 columns or 3 columns instead of 1. The example that is on the right side of your screen, we can see that within 2 piers there are 2 columns, not only 1, there are 2 columns. So there may be 3 columns as well, and this arrangement can be more and more complex. Sometimes a column between 2 adjoining piers, they were combined, and on the left hand side you can see such joined columns together, but though they were not used in between the piers. But this is a very common practice that these double columns or triple columns or 4 columns, they were bunched together and they were used in between the piers to take the load of the above walls. So these double or multiple bunched columns, they were specifically a feature of Romanesque cloisters in Spain, Italy and southern France. So cloister means an ambulatory. Now we will discuss about the roofs and vaulting of the Romanesque building. The majority of buildings at that time, they had wooden roofs. They generally consisted of a simple truss, tie beams or king posts. In case of trussed rafter roofs, they are sometimes lined with wooden ceilings in 3 sections like those that survive at Ely and Peterborough cathedrals in England. In churches, typically the aisles, they were vaulted, but the nave is roofed with timber, as in the case of both the previous cathedrals that we said, that Ely and Peterborough. In Italy, there were open wooden roofs, they are common, and the tie beams frequently occur at the conjunction with the vaults. The timber roofs or the timbers that were used, they were often decorated, as we can see in San Miniato in Florence. The vaults of stone or brick, they took on several different forms, and they showed extensive development during this period. They evolved into different types of vaults like the cross vault or groin vault, ribbed vault, or the pointed vault, which we will discuss now. The first of them is a barrel vault. The barrel vault is also known as a tunnel vault or a wagon vault. This is an architectural element formed by the extrusion of a single semicircular arc along a given distance. Fine. Single semicircular arc which is extruded through a straight line at a given distance. So these curves are basically arcs, rather they are semicircular arc. They gave a semi-cylindrical appearance to the total design. The barrel vault is basically the simplest form of all the vaults. On the extreme left of your screen, you can see a simple arch, semicircular arch, and when this semicircular arch is extruded through a straight line, we get the barrel vault, which is shown in the second diagram. We will come to the third diagram later on. The third diagram, we call it the cross vault or groin vault, but we will discuss about the barrel vault first. Here you can see that this is a simple semicircular arch, and when we extrude this simple semicircular arch through a straight line, we get this type of vault, which is called the barrel vault or the semicircular vault. So this is basically a typical semicircular vault. Fine. The next to the barrel vault is the groin vault. Groin vault or groin vault, also sometimes known as double barrel vault or the cross vault, it is basically produced by the intersection of two barrel vaults at right angle. So the word groin refers to the edge between the intersecting vaults. Sometimes the arches of groin vault are pointed instead of round. In comparison with a barrel vault, a groin vault provides good economics of material and labor, and the thrust, it is concentrated along the groins or the arises, that are the four diagonal edges that are formed along the points or the line of intersection of these two vaults. So this vault need only support at four corners. Here we can see that these are two barrel vaults. So when these two barrel vaults, they intersect with each other, let's see the intersection. So you can see they are intersecting at right angles. So these were the vaults previously, and now we are just moving the right side vault inside the left side vault. So now we can see that they are intersecting with each other. So the intersection is complete. When the intersection is complete, we remove these parts. These parts we remove. Fine. These are the parts that we remove. The removed part or the parts that will be removed, that is shown in this particular diagram in red. And after their removal, these surfaces, when these surfaces are removed, we get some form that looks like this, and we call it as a cross vault or groin vault. From inside, it looks like something like this. Fine. Now, if you look from the top, these lines, if you follow my mouse cursor, you can see these lines we call it as groins. Fine. And that's why these vaults are groin vault. If we consider the typical barrel vault, the thrust is through all these edges, and for this reason the walls must be thicker and thicker to counter that thrust, which is coming from this particular vault to the exteriors, this side and this side and this side. Fine. Now if we consider the groin vault, what is happening? The sides are now free. you can see that there is nothing. All the stress or lateral thrust that is coming, that thrust is coming through the groins or through the diagonal lines, and that's why all the load is concentrated on its four corners. Fine. So you can now see that the load is concentrated on four corners. So with the use of the groin vault or the cross vault, the excessive use of the use of excessively thick walls, they were somewhat reduced. Now we will continue into the development, the gradual development of vaults, but before that we need to understand one simple thing, that is the amount of thrust and its relationship with the curvature or the height of the arch. Fine. So for that reason we need to understand a little bit of mathematics. This is on the left hand side, figure 32.5. This is a typical arch, and the height of the arch is h and the length of the arch is L. We can find the value of the lateral thrust or lateral reaction by HA and HB. With this derivation, this particular tutorial is taken from an NPTEL course run by Civil Engineering Department of IIT Kharagpur. So if someone is interested in the structural nitty-gritties of the arch, this type of arches, they can go into detail. But just for your understanding, we are calculating the moments here, and we are equalizing the moments around its two corners, two end points, that is point A and point B. So when we calculate the reaction forces or the lateral reaction forces or horizontal reaction forces HA and HB, we can find that HB is equal to PL by 8H. Now P is the amount of load that is coming on this particular arch, L is the length of the arch. Let us consider that the load and the length, both of the arch, both parameters of this arch is constant, and on the denominator we can find there is 8H. Fine. So if H increases, then the value of HB will reduce, and if H decreases, that means the height of the arch or the rise of the arch, if it decreases, then the lateral thrust or the HB will be higher. So the more high an arch will be, the rise of arch, more the rise of the arch, the lesser the reaction. Fine. So this is just for your information, and when we progress to the next part, you please remember this thing, that whenever the height of the arch is increasing, there is less lateral thrust, but whenever the height of the arch is decreasing, there is more amount of lateral thrust. So as a designer, if we want to reduce the lateral thrust given by an arch, we need to increase the height of the arch, or we have to design some arches whose height is not very less, or the arch which is not very flat. So please remember this when we will go into the detail how the cross vault or the groin vault developed into a ribbed vault. So please understand this particular thing. More the height, less lateral thrust, less the height, more lateral thrust. So we have seen that higher the arch, the lesser the lateral thrust. Now as we follow the groins, we can see, and we take a section of the entire structure through these groins. If we take a section through this particular groin, we will get some arch which is something like this. Fine. Now you understand one thing, this particular length, if it is 2r, this is r, that means the height is r, and this length is 2 root 2r and the height is r. This length, that means the diameter of this particular arch is 2 root 2r and the height is only the r. So this is not a perfectly semicircular arch. So if it is not a semicircular arch, the lateral thrust of these particular two arches are much higher. if we can convert it into a semicircular arch, in this particular case, the lateral thrust even on the four corners of this particular vault, that they will be much lesser. So these are the two non-semicircular groins that we can see in the section. Fine. Now, if we convert it to a semicircular one, then what will happen? The height of this particular arch will increase, and that's why the lateral thrusts, they will substantially reduce. Now let us see what there was and what it can be if we replace it with the previous groin of the simple cross vault. Fine. It will take just a little bit of time, and we are so this was the original groin of the simple or the cross vault, and this is the modified case where the height of the groin is increased. Fine. Whenever the height of the groin is increased, then you can say that this height will not remain the same, because you have to match the height of the center and the center of this particular arch. So the height of this particular arch has to be increased, and that's why later on the pointed arch came into existence. So this pointed arch was a typical phenomena or extensively used phenomena of Gothic architecture, but it was developed in the time of Romanesque. In the Gothic architecture that you will learn later, you will understand the pointed arches and the development of cross vault, which we will call as the ribbed vault. We will learn it later in the next module. So you understood what was the reason, or what were the reason that actually gave birth to the Gothic vaulting or the Gothic arches. Though this is not part of Romanesque, but this development of Gothic arches and everything else, but this Gothic arch or the pointed arch that was extensively used in the Gothic times or Gothic period, it was actually developed in the Romanesque era. Here in this slide, you can see the first example. The top left is basically a simple barrel vault. The second one, top right, is an example of groin vault. Bottom left, it is basically an example of a ribbed vault or the vault with pointed arches. Why they came into existence, we just discussed. And the last one, bottom right, is basically an much more ornate, delicate and decorative variation of vault. We call it fan vault, which we can find in the Gothic period and particularly in England. Fine. So these were basically the different types of vault that we can find in this Romanesque period, but the last one we can extensively find it, last two rather, we can extensively find them in Gothic period, which is the upcoming architectural style that we will learn later on. Now this is the example of real world examples of different types of vault. The first one is a painted barrel vault, which is just a semicircle, which you can see. The second one is basically a transverse barrel vault, whose direction is different compared to the first one that you can see from the image. The third one is the example of cross vault or groin vault, and the fourth one is the example of the ribbed vault. In the case of ribbed vault, I just would like to mention that the ribs or the framework, they were first built by masonry, the stone masonry, and the space in between them, they were used to be filled with infills. Fine. So more or less now we can understand about the different types of vaulting that were used in the Romanesque period, and the vaulting, extensively ornate vaulting that we can see in the Gothic period. It has its seed in the Romanesque period itself. If there was no Romanesque vaulting, we cannot see or we wouldn't be able to see the extensively ornate Gothic vaulting. So we will try to summarize the difference between different types of vault, especially the groin vault or cross vault and the ribbed vault or the pointed arch vault here. So a ribbed vault is the intersection of two pointed barrel vaults, while a groin vault is the intersection of two simple semicircular barrel vaults. The difference between the groin vault and the ribbed vault or pointed barrel vault is that a pointed barrel vault more directly transfers the load across the arch and mostly down the columns or corner supports. This is why that the vaults get more attention during the Gothic period because of their more efficiency. Better load transfer means smaller buttresses. Smaller buttresses means more windows, and more windows means more light in the space. More light in the space in the case of Gothic churches means more heavenly association with the man who is looking at the different parts of the church, and he will get a surreal or more heavenly feeling. So with the advancement of advancement of the vaulting, the darkness of Romanesque arches, Romanesque churches, they were done away with, and the interiors of churches got more light and air, and at the same time more surreal feeling or more heavenly feeling that came into existence in the case of Gothic churches, which were unimaginable in the Romanesque churches. But the contribution of Romanesque is that it helped the Gothic arches to develop, and these developments, they created the excellent Gothic architectures that we see around the world nowadays. Now we move to the next component, which is again a definitive trait of Romanesque architecture, that is its large towers and the west walls. The Romanesque church facades generally towards the west end of the building are usually symmetrical. They have a large central portal which is made significant by its molding or use of a porch, and at the same time an arrangement of arched topped windows. So this delicately detailed western facade is called the westwork. It is generally monumental and west facing entrance of the church. The exterior consists of multiple stories between these two towers, and we will see that there are towers on this facade. The interior includes an entrance vestibule, a chapel, and a series of galleries overlooking the nave. The smaller churches often have a single tower that is usually placed on the western end in France or in England, either centrally or to one side, while the larger churches and cathedrals, they often have two large towers. As we can see in this example, the churches, they have two towers by the side of the main entrance. These towers were an important feature of Romanesque churches, and a great number of them are still standing. They take a variety of forms. Sometimes they are square, circular, or sometimes octagonal. They are positioned differently in relation to the church building in different countries. In northern France, two large towers such as at Caen, were to become an integral part of the facade of any large abbey or cathedral. In central and southern France, this is more variable, and large churches may have one tower or a central tower. Uh, central tower. Large churches in Spain and Portugal, they usually have two towers. Arcades were a very prominent feature of Romanesque architecture. Arcade is basically a row of arches. These arches were supported on piers or columns. They occur in the interior of large churches, separating the nave from the aisle, and in larger secular interior open spaces such as great hall of a castle, supporting the timbers of a roof or upper floor. Arcades can also occur in cloisters and in atriums enclosing an open space. These arcades can occur in stories or stages, as we had seen in the stoas in Greek architecture. The arcade of a cloister is typically of a single stage. The arcade that divides the nave and aisle in a church is typically of two stages. Sometimes they also have a third stage which has the window openings and known as clerestory windows. Arcading on a large scale generally fulfills a structural purpose, but it is also used in small scale as a decorative feature. External arcades, the arcades can both be used internally and externally. When the external arcades they don't have any space or any opening to be accessed, then they are called as blind arcades with only a wall or a narrow passage behind the series of arches. So these blind arcades cannot be accessed by humans. These arcades were extremely ornate, and different types of moldings can be seen in the arcades. Some of them we will discuss now. First of them are the chevron. Chevron is a zigzag molding used extensively in Romanesque arches. The second one is billet or billet. It is a molding that is formed by a series of circular or semi-cylindrical objects which more or less protrudes like a tongue. They are disposed alternately with the notches in single or multiple rows. The second example of this particular slide shows the billet. The next type of molding is called the lozenges. It is basically a diamond shaped decoration that found carved on pillars and arches. The fourth one is a star. It is also called a chip carved star. It is a motif of star flower or saltire cross. The next is the decoration called the nail heads. It is basically a molding feature with a series of contagious projecting pyramids or trapezoidal solids, often carved with different creatures. The next one is a cable. It is a convex molding carved in imitation of a rope or cord and used to decorate the moldings of the Romanesque style. It is thought that its inspiration came from the twisted vines from the carvings of classical Roman architecture.